Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of our webinar series, the ASEAN-Japan Insights. Thank you for taking the time to join us for this occasion. The ASEAN-Japan Insights series is an initiative that aims to be the leading information sharing platform on key ASEAN and Japan matters. Our speakers will comprise of leaders and experts from industries, academia, and governments from within the region. Each webinar will be co-organized with a partner institution in ASEAN and Japan to foster cross-collaboration and co-creation between stakeholders in our two regions. This time, we are proud to co-organize this webinar together with the Center for Southeast Asian Studies at Kyoto University. We are grateful for the support of SEAS, especially through Director Mieno Fumiharu, for enabling this collaboration between our center and a leading Japan-based research institute on Southeast Asian affairs. Join us today as we unravel the complexities of carbon markets, examine policy frameworks, and envision a future marked by sustainability and resilience. Through presentations and discussions featuring experts from Climate Impact X in Singapore, IDX Carbon Exchange in Indonesia, ASEAN Center for Energy, and the Tokyo Stock Exchange, we shall explore challenges and opportunities arising from carbon trading between ASEAN countries and Japan. To formally begin our webinar, may I call on the ASEAN-Japan Center Secretary General Hirabayashi to say a few words. Secretary General, please.
Thank you. Greetings from very chilly and rainy Tokyo. Mr. Edwin Hartanto, Head of Carbon Trading Development Unit of the Indonesia Stock Exchange. Mr. Mikkel Larsen, CEO of Climate Impact X Singapore. Mr. Matsuo Takumi, General Manager of the Carbon Credit Market Development Office of Tokyo Stock Exchange. And Dr. Zulfikar Yunardi, Manager of Energy Modeling and Policy Planning, ASEAN Center for Energy. Thank you all of joining us today, despite your very, very busy schedule. We are very privileged and grateful for the support of Kyoto University Center of Southeast Asia Studies, especially through Director and Professor Mieno Fumiharu's support in co-organizing today's event. And also special thanks to our moderator, Dr. Julie De Los Reyes, Assistant Professor at the Center of Southeast Asian Studies, Kyoto University. Your expertise is sure to spark vibrant discussion on today's crucial topic. Friends and colleagues, it is my honor to welcome you to the second installment of the ASEAN-Japan Center's ongoing series entitled ASEAN-Japan Insight. This is a platform dedicated to fostering collaboration and knowledge exchange on the critical issues shaping our region and illuminate the ever-evolving ASEAN-Japan relation. Our previous webinar on cross-border digital payment system shed light on the potential for deeper economic ties between ASEAN country and Japan and the overall more integrated ASEAN market through enhanced digital payment systems. But today, we also embark side by side on a journey toward a sustainable and interconnected future. This time, we shall delve into the dynamic realm of carbon trading market. ASEAN has set forth an ambitious target, indeed, to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. This endeavor not only promises environmental benefit, but also significant economic gains, with projections indicating a substantial uplift in GDP across our member states. As we march toward this goal, it has become imperative to establish robust frameworks for cooperation. Our webinar today touches upon a key development in ASEAN region cooperation, the ASEAN strategy for carbon neutrality. We will also touch upon the Asia Zero Emissions Community, or AZEC, an initiative led by Japan. This webinar will examine the current state of carbon trading and weigh in on the initial steps for cooperation between our two regions in developing interoperable carbon market. Colleagues and friends, what do successful carbon trading market look like? How does carbon tax registration influence carbon trading market? What are the national frameworks in the ASEAN country and Japan working toward this? And what is the future of carbon trading in Japan and ASEAN? These are just some of the questions we will be reckoning today. Our webinar is a testament to the ASEAN-Japan Center's commitment toward inclusive, resilient, and sustainable trade through fostering collaboration in advancing energy cooperation and accelerating the energy transition. In alignment with AZEC, or the Asia Zero Emission Community, articulated on the joint vision statement on ASEAN-Japan Friendship Cooperation in December 2023, this discussion holds particularly significance. In the face of global imperative on sustainable development and climate change mitigation, carbon trading emerged as a pivotal mechanism. It offers both challenges and also opportunities for ASEAN countries and Japan alike. I really look forward to the insightful exchange initiated by these esteemed experts with us here today, and to the rich discussion that will undoubtedly emerge from this series. Thank you very much for being part of this significant endeavor. Together, let us pave the way toward a more sustainable and prosperous future for ASEAN and Japan. ありがとうございます。Terima kasih banyak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary General Hirabayashi, for your opening remarks and for setting the context for this panel discussion. For the reference of our viewers, this webinar is mainly conducted in English, but we have a simultaneous Japanese interpretation available via Zoom. So please check your Zoom interpretation button and please kindly select your preferred language. Also, after the following presentations, if you have any questions for the presenters, we will be collecting your questions via the chat box or the Q&A box. So please feel free to insert or enter your questions at any time during the webinar, and we will try to address your questions towards the end of the panel discussion, also depending on the availability of our time. However, before we get into the content that everyone is waiting for, I would like to quickly introduce our panelists and moderator. Our moderator for this afternoon is Professor Julie de los Reyes. She is an assistant professor at the Center for Southeast Asian Studies and the Hakubi Center for Advanced Research at Kyoto University. Her research is concerned with the dynamics of energy transition in East and Southeast Asia, focusing on coal investments and disinvestments, and emerging hydrogen supply chains. Her previous work examined financialization and its impacts on the geography of mining investments in the global gold mining industry. Up next, from our esteemed panelists and speakers, we have Mr. Mikkel Larsen, CEO of Climate Impact X Singapore. CIX is a global exchange and marketplace for high-quality credits. Mikkel led the Sustainability Working Group of the Emerging Stronger Task Force, a public-private partnership that culminated in the formation of the CIX. Prior to CIX, Mikkel was a Group Chief Sustainability Officer and Chair of the Sustainability Council at DBS Bank. He also held management positions at UBS, Citigroup, and KPMG. Mikkel's perspective will be invaluable for providing the current status quo of carbon trading in Singapore. We also have with us representatives from national stock exchanges. From Indonesia's stock exchange, we have Mr. Edwin Hartanto, head of the Carbon Trading Development Unit. His work is concerned with developing the carbon market by IDX and managing its operational, marketing, and regulatory aspects. He will walk us through accelerating net zero and unlocking Indonesia's carbon market potential through carbon exchange mechanisms facilitated by IDX Carbon. Similarly, from Tokyo Stock Exchange, we have Mr. Matsuo Takumi, the General Manager of its Carbon Credit Market Development Office since 2022. Matsuo-san has served as Senior Officer in the Corporate Strategy Department of the Japan Exchange Group since 2016, and he has been seconded to Japan's Ministry of Finance and the Japan Securities Depository Center, Incorporated. Matsuo-san will shed light on the Japanese government's efforts to cultivate a carbon credit market. And finally, to give us an ASEAN regional perspective of the topics at hand, we are privileged to have with us today a representative of the ASEAN Center for Energy, Dr. Zulfikar Yurnaidi, Manager of Energy Modeling and Policy Planning. He also acts as Senior Research Analyst of the ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project. Through these roles, he conducts research and cooperation activities in the field of renewable energy, energy efficiency, and climate change. Today, he will guide us through the ASEAN regional initiatives, as well as the unique challenges and opportunities faced by the ASEAN member states in institutionally advancing carbon credits. Meanwhile, our moderator, Professor De Los Reyes, will join us later for the panel discussion segment after the following presentations. With that said, let's head right into what our speakers have prepared. Let's start off with a presentation from Climate Impact X CEO, Mikkel Larsen. Mikkel, please.
Thank you very much for having me. Unfortunately, that's about as far as my Japanese goes, so you will have to allow me to proceed in English. I want to use my opening remarks to talk about the carbon market that I believe that we need to have to make this a robust one. Before I do that though, I do want to make two comments. First, I want to congratulate the Japanese government and not least the Tokyo Stock Exchange for having put in place many of the fundamental roadblocks that I think we need in order to create such a market. And that is very, very important and should not be underestimated. Secondly, I do also know that some of you will come away from this having to take tangible actions, either as delivering into this market or having to buy carbon credits. And for those of you, I offer only one advice. Make sure that you do your homework and choose your partners wisely, because we're still in a very early day where you need to think about the quality of what you're buying, how you use these credits and the claims that you make, the price that you are paying, and that you get the true execution that you need to actually feel comfortable in this market. And I'm sure I and other of the participants will talk more about this. With that being said, what I'm about to present to you now is a presentation that I also gave to the finance minister of APAC in San Francisco, and I think it's very fitting for this audience. First of all, what is the market I think we need? I think we need a market that has two elements to truly be robust. I think we need a market that converges the voluntary carbon market and the compliance market, because after all, these are two market mechanisms that are trying to achieve the same things using different tools. And we shouldn't have to choose, we should have to merge them. And secondly, and perhaps equally importantly, I think we need to connect local markets to one truly global market. And I say this with all humbleness around the challenges that occur when that happens. But APAC has a real chance to actually do that. And the reason why I'm focused on that is because most countries will either have more supply or demand. Different countries will have better solutions for solving climate change than other countries. And we need to let capital markets with the liquidity flow between those markets in order to solve climate change and biodiversity risk change most effectively. Sadly, that's not the market we're having today. Today, we have two slightly different types of market. We have a compliance market, which is well known in places like the EU with the EU ETS, in China, in California, and many other places. It is also in the compliance market that we have what's called Article 6 credits. Now, this is a dominant market right now, which is multitudes larger than the voluntary carbon market. And many of the mechanisms here is trying to reduce carbon emissions. On the other hand, we have the voluntary carbon market that is trying to encourage people to mitigate and to contribute to climate change mitigation, where they do not have the means today to get to net zero. An example of where these two can merge is what we have in Singapore, where we actually have a mix of a compliance and a voluntary market. Under the Singapore tax scheme, you can actually surrender carbon credits from other markets, i.e. internationally, instead of paying up to 5% of your tax. And that creates an immediate incentive for corporates to take action. This is something that I think other countries will start to replicate, especially countries like Japan, who needs to meet their NDCs and are limited in their onshore options. I also think it's important to call out just how big a market ASEAN could be in terms of supply of carbon credit. If you look at some of the studies, one from Singapore suggests that actually most of the really profitable carbon credits will be delivered right here in Asia. In Southeast Asia, particularly also in Japan and in India. And what it shows us is that many of the fertile ground for supply, whether they be in biochar, nature-based solutions, whether they be in technology-based solutions, are right here. And it's therefore sad to see that although the ASEAN impact on climate change is significant, only 14% is covered by the carbon market today. A huge potential for us collectively. In Japan, of course, corporates and people engaged in the market have two mechanisms. They can buy from the JCM mechanisms or J credits, or they can buy in the voluntary carbon market. And given this dynamics, one may ask, why would anybody enter the voluntary carbon market? What we see from our customers, including those in Japan, is that companies do that because they want to meet their targets, either because they have science-based targets beyond value chain mitigation, because they want to make claims under the voluntary carbon market initiative, or simply because they want to do the right thing from climate change. And we continue to see this market grows, and we believe that the Japanese corporates will also take an interest in this, especially those credits of higher quality. So a little bit about us before I finish. We were set up here in Singapore with the partners that you see here at the bottom that we're very proud of. DBS, Temasek or Gen Zero, Mizuho Bank, who's a very proud partner of ours, SGX, our local exchange, and Standard Chartered Bank. And we always felt that this market needed to solve for 4 problems of trust today. Trust in the product. Our buyers don't really understand what good quality look like. Trust in the use of the product. What claims can you make? Making sure we guide them on the right price. Today, prices varies from everything from $2 to $800 or more. And finally, making sure that the execution is right. I think it's upon all of us in this market to make sure that we instill that trust, whether you're an intermediary, whether you're a regulator, whether you're a buyer, whether you're a seller. You need to ensure that what we are doing is of high quality and that the right claims are being made so we actually have a chance to stop climate change. So how do I envision this could happen between countries here in ASEAN? And as I said, I do believe we could create a win-win situation better than any other region. First of all, I think we need to establish local strong carbon markets. And again, I want to congratulate the Japanese government and Tokyo Stock Exchange and others for putting in place some of the regulations and some of the market mechanisms for that. Then we need to connect the markets. We need to make sure that a buyer in Indonesia can buy credits from Japan or vice versa, or via Singapore, because only then do we solve a climate change. It has been done in other markets. It can be done in carbon markets. Then I think the next step could be to develop cross-border standardized contract where we actually accept each other's standards. And then finally, as a step, I think we can collaborate on cross-border NDC-aligned credit facilities so that we know that we have a full integration between the compliance market and voluntary market, just like Singapore has done with its carbon tax. All of these 4 steps have challenges, but I think between them, we have a fair chance in ASEAN to be the first region to truly have this proposition. And with that, I'll finish my presentations. Thank you very much.
Very much, Mikkel, for setting the information that we all need to hear, given that the market for the carbon trading is relatively emerging, and this is a very important and relevant time for us to be taking caution, but at the same time trusting the process and also doing our due diligence for assessing the companies and the solutions that are being offered at the market at present. And at this moment, we would also be hearing from the perspective from Indonesia. And I would like to call on Mr. Edwin Hartanto to talk us through the status quo on carbon trading in Indonesia. Edwin?
Hi, Kate. Hi, everyone. Okay, so I think I will start my presentation, and for the next 5 to 6 minutes, I'm going to try to present about how and what is the current condition of Indonesia carbon exchange. So thanks very much for Mikkel, who has set up the scene for this material. And I'm going to start with the carbon pricing as one of the tools to address climate change, which is, simply put, carbon pricing is when we put a price on the carbon, and when those who pollute will have this incentive imposed on them, and for those who can reduce or remove carbon from our atmosphere, they will have their incentive. So that's why this carbon trading comes from this carbon pricing scheme. So Mikkel already explained about 2 types of carbon market. The first one is the compliance or ETS, and the one is more on the voluntary side with the carbon crediting. So the same, Indonesia also implement these 2 carbon market right now. The first one, the ETS, we have cap and trade and tax, in which those who cannot fulfill their obligation through cap and trade, they have to pay the carbon tax. And on the other side of the carbon crediting and carbon offsetting, for those who own green project, they can ask to the Ministry of Environment to issue the carbon credit, in which they can sell later to the market. So this is the regulation of Indonesia carbon trading. The first one, of course, we start with the ratification of Paris Agreement by Indonesia government. We were doing it in 2016, and then we set up our NDCs, which now we have this enhanced NDC, and we would like to reduce our emission by 31.89 to 43.20% in 2030. And we would like to achieve net zero in 2060 or sooner. And then the target of this emission reduction derive or cascade to the 5 sectors. And through the presidential regulation of 2021, here we set up the rules for the carbon trading, in which the regulation of Ministry of Environment says that there are 2 kind of market mechanism, in which the first one is the ETS of the compliance, and the second one is the carbon crediting or carbon offsetting. So under the law of number 4 in 2023 of Indonesia on financial sector development and reinforcement, the carbon unit is defined as securities. So it doesn't define as commodities under Indonesian law. So that's why the OJK, or the Indonesia Financial Service Authority, is the one who has responsibility to oversee or watch the carbon market. So that's why us, Indonesia Stock Exchange, then apply for the license to act as a carbon exchange. And on 26th of September 2023, Mr. President himself, Joko Widodo, launched the Indonesia Carbon Exchange, or IDX Carbon, accompanied by several ministries, and there are 15 different companies who act as the first buyer with the carbon credit sold from one project of geothermal energy. So we can see that Indonesia own a vast or a huge potential of carbon unit through either carbon capture and storage, or the forestry sector, or through the energy sectors. Mr. President said himself that the Indonesia carbon exchange economic potential may reach 3,000 trillion of Indonesian rupiah. And that's why I guess we can see in the regional that Malaysia, Japan also already established the carbon exchange, because we have to capture the huge potential. So here in Indonesia, all the carbon unit, either it's for the ETS or for the carbon credit, all has to go through the SRN, or National Register System, belong to the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. And us, as Indonesia Carbon Exchange, is the secondary market in which we only trade whatever the SRN or the Ministry of Environment issued. So that's the important concept here. And here, if the project want to issue the carbon or the carbon credit, they have to go through several steps in which we have familiar with, either it with the PDD, and it has to be validated and verification by a VVB, validation and verification body, before it can go through the Ministry of Environment, and by then it can be sold to the IDX Carbon. And we have 4 markets available for the seller and buyer. Is we offer high flexibility in which they can choose whatever market they deem suitable, either through auction, regular trading, negotiated, or through the marketplace. And there are several, of course, difference between the carbon and then stock or bond, in which there are retirement for carbon unit, something that is unusual for stock and obligation and bond, and then there's no dividend or coupon payment for this carbon unit. So we would like to invite all of you to join us on IDX Carbon, and we would like to open our door to local and also international carbon player to do business with us. So thanks very much. That's from me. Kate, back to you.
Thank you so much, Edwin. I believe Indonesia has a big role to play among the ASEAN member states in terms of moving forward the regional initiative towards the carbon neutral regional project. And I think before we move on to our speaker from Tokyo Stock Exchange, to finally cap off a regional perspective, we'd like to hear from the ASEAN Center for Energy, Dr. Zulfikar Yornaidi. Dr. Yornaidi, please.
Thank you very much. Allow me some time to share my screen. Okay, so I believe you are looking at my screen right now. So my name is Zulfikar from the ASEAN Center for Energy. So I think in the next 5 minutes, I would like to explain about the potential of carbon pricing in ASEAN, especially for the carbonization of energy sector. So previously we have heard from Mikael and also Edwin on the idea of carbon trading, carbon market for emission reduction, and I would like to bring the discussion into one of the key sectors of decarbonization, which is the energy. So allow me to start by introducing our institution, the ASEAN Center for Energy. So we are the intergovernmental organization that represents the interests of the 10 ASEAN member states in energy sector. So we play 3 roles as a catalyst, knowledge hub, and also think tank in the region. So we do our activities guided by the APAEC, which is the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation. And within that, we have 7 program areas. So we cover the topics of electricity through ASEAN Power Grid, oil and gas, even coal, energy efficiency, renewable energy, regional energy policy planning, and also civilian nuclear energy. And if you see there, we do have regional targets in terms of energy efficiency and renewable energy. According to the 7 ASEAN Energy Outlook, or the AEO 7, which is our flagship publication together with ASEAN member states, we see that the energy use in the region will be growing for the next 3 decades. It even reached 4 times in our baseline scenario, although with the strong utilization of energy efficiency technologies and also renewable energy penetration, we can reduce this energy growth until step 2.7 times only. So again, the strong impact of energy efficiency cannot be understated for us to reduce the energy use and with that reduce the energy emission. Meanwhile, from the demand sector, we see that the industry and transport sector will still play a role as the two highest energy sectors, especially coming from oil products for the transport sector and also coal for the power and also industry sector. So I think this is very relevant for our discussion in carbon trading and carbon market. Now, we are going a little bit into details about the assessment that we have regarding the carbon pricing policies in ASEAN. So this is based on our policy brief released earlier this year on the progress of carbon pricing in ASEAN to support the shift towards a low carbon economy. So we see here the comparisons of the countries, 10 ASEAN member states, and we see that all countries actually, except for the Philippines, already have their own net zero target with different target year and also different definitions. Some say net zero, the others say carbon neutral. And Thailand, for example, has both the net zero for carbon, but also neutrality for the whole emission. And we see that only Singapore currently implementing a carbon tax. And Indonesia is the one that starts to implement the emission trading system, as explained by Edwin previously. But we noted that all the countries, except for Brunei Darussalam, has experience working with carbon credit previously, especially through the JCM and also CDM mechanisms. But we also see that almost all countries, except for the Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, already the policy of carbon pricing noted in their climate change policy. By climate change policy, here we also we refer, of course, to the NDC and also the LTES if the country has it. So with that situations, we last year we conducted the high-level policy dialogues on the carbon pricing, and we conducted a specific survey, especially on that period. Our topic was on the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, that just being discussed, I think, in Europe, and what will be the impact to the region. And we see that all countries actually understand what are the CBAM and its impact for them in terms of the trading. But 31% mentioned that the countries in ASEAN are not ready for the CBAM. Many agree that the CBAM can be can be good for the regions in achieving their net zero target, and 97% agree that the price will be higher as an impact of the CBAM, especially when they are exporting goods to the Europe countries which implement the CBAM. We also noted that it will reduce the emission in industry, as it will force the industry players to reduce the emission to fit with the CBAM mechanisms. And same, it will also increase the penetration of renewable energy in the industry sector. We then try to see what do they think about the CBAM impact in the energy intensive industries to be have a more detailed, and 38% say that it might force the countries to increase the replacement of technologies, either through retrofitting of their inefficient technologies or through more utilization of renewable energy. But they also noted that our impacts on increasing production and operational costs, and also enforcing in capacity building to make the ASEAN member states ready to be part of this CBAM mechanisms. Several strategies that are mentioned, including, of course, implementation of capacity building activities on what are the CBAM, how we can react to that, and also establishing policies and multi-sectoral cooperation are noted as the second and third highest solution. And also carbon pricing scheme is actually mentioned there, although it's only 7%, but we also understand that policies and also multi-sectoral cooperation can also include the carbon pricing scheme. Among the policy suggestions, as I mentioned, carbon pricing is the top. So the 34%, at the very least, know what is carbon pricing and how it can impact the competitiveness of our industry sector as an impact of CBAM, although they also noted that it might increase the price of industrial products overall. Another policy suggestions include investment through renewable energy, stakeholder engagement, and also MRV. So this will be my last slide. So upon that discussions and also our policy brief mentioned before, several recommendations that we put forward in promoting the carbon pricing in ASEAN, of course, in collaboration with Japan as one of our strongest dialogue partners. First, of course, in enhance the understanding and also capacity buildings to make the policymakers understand what is the carbon pricing, what its benefits, and how to implement that in a step-by-step way to the countries, especially to countries such as Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and also Vietnam. But for the other countries that already have instruments such as Singapore and Indonesia on how to optimize this market, and later on, as mentioned before, how to connect maybe like two countries in the region to start having a bilateral carbon trading. Development and implementation of carbon pricing policies is very important as follow-up of the capacity building. On the other hand, we also need to foster the renewable energy as one of the solutions. So the industry can know what kind of solutions that they can do to address this carbon pricing mechanism. We also need to collaborate regionally within ASEAN, but also internationally with partners, engage stakeholders, and also to strengthen the regulatory frameworks, both nationally and also regionally. So with that, I will stop my presentation and looking forward to having a discussion with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yernaidi, for providing a regional overview and for allowing us to see where the other ASEAN member states are in terms of their implementation and in terms of their achievements so far for establishing carbon trading initiatives within their own countries. And I think that brings us to our last speaker. We would be hearing from the Tokyo Stock Exchange General Manager, Mr. Matsuo Takumi, and he will be sharing with us what the Japan government has been doing in terms of advancing its carbon trading market. Matsuo-san, どうぞよろしくお願いします。
東京証券取引所の松尾でございます。ASEAN センターの皆様には、私どもの市場をご紹介する機会を与えていただいてありがとうございます。それでは私のスライドをお願いいたします。1ページめくっていただけますでしょうか。次のスライドで。ありがとうございます。私どもの市場は、日本国政府が導入するカーボンプライシング、炭素税とエミッショントレーディングスキームのうち、エミッショントレーディングスキームにつきまして、日本国政府が考えているエミッショントレーディングスキームは、ヨーロッパのような公的な義務を伴うものではなくて、自主参加型の、排出量取引、自分で制度の参加に応募して自分で目標を設定するという、新しい形の排出量取引を導入しておりまして、その名前が GX リーグとなっております。で、GX リーグを、導入するにあたりまして、カーボンクレジットを取引する市場が必要であるということが、政府の政策として明確に示されて、それに私たちが応える形で市場を整備したということでございます。で、こちらにございますように、2022年に、GX リーグの基本的構想が打ち出されたときに、それに応じまして、2022年の9月から2023年の1月まで、カーボンクレジット市場の試行的な実施をいたしました。で、それを踏まえまして、政府の方でカーボン GX 推進の基本的方針というものが閣議決定されまして、それの中で2023年の市場創設が期待されているということが示されましたので、準備を進めてまいりまして、昨年の10月に私どものところで市場を立ち上げたというところでございます。で、1ページめくっていただきますと、その GX リーグとカーボンクレジット市場の関係が示されておりまして、上半分が政府の方で制度を導入する GX リーグの中身でございまして、目標より超過して削減した部分につきまして、ここの中ではエクセスリダクションと いう名前の、クレジットが、創出をされて、そのエクセスリダクションを、他の会社、この図ですと、カンパニー B の方が、購入することで目標を達成できるというメカニズムになっております。で、このエクセスリダクションを含めて、自主的に取引する場所として、カーボンクレジット市場、東京証券取引所が、下半分で、位置づけられておりまして、取引される対象としまして、このエクセスリダクション、超過削減枠というものの他に、このオレンジの下枠の半分にありますように、J クレジットと呼ばれるものと、先ほど冒頭、CIX 様からご紹介ありました JCM と呼ばれる、ベースライン&クレジット型の、クレジットが、取引されることが想定されているということでございます。で、今現在実際に、日本の市場において流通する可能性のあるのは J クレジットということにしかないので、私どもの市場で、昨年度の今年の市場の開設の際に、取引対象としましたら、この J クレジットから、まずスタートしているということでございます。で、次のページを見ていただきますと、J クレジットの概要が示されておりまして、こちらは日本国政府、具体的には経済産業省、環境省、農林水産省が、制度の運営をしておりますけれども、この右半分のところに、大きく6つのメソドロジーの分野がありまして、その中に、個々の個別の方法論があるという体系になって、ございます。で、年間、実は、J クレジット市場を生み出される量が非常に創出量が少なくて、年間だいたい100万トンぐらい、生み出されるというもので、非常に、小さいと。これはおそらく、創出者が地方公共団体や中小企業ということが多いということに起因していると思われますけれども、取引対象としては非常に供給量が少ないというものになっております。で、これを反映しまして、私どもの制度設計としまして、次のページ見ていただきますと、取引としては、コールオークション1日2回の取引をするという形を、とっております。また、取引単位も海外では1000トン、あるいは500トンというものが多いですけれども、トレーニングユニットとしては1トンから取引できるようにしてございます。で、次のページを見ていただきますと、これは私どもカーボンクレジット市場の全体図でございますけれども、トレーディングシステムとしましては、AWS を使ったインターネットベースの、トレーディングシステムを作りまして、あと制度の特徴としましては、取引所、TSE が、資金決済とクレジットの移転の間に入って、元本リスクを排除しているというところになります。で、次のページ見ていただきますと、私どもの、市場参加者、その次ですね。はい、ありがとうございます。市場参加者としては265社、いらっしゃいまして、ガス、エネルギー、電気、ガス業の方、あるいはその金融機関の方が、参加者の業種としては多くなっております。また、去年の11月から2月の末まで、マーケットメーカー制度を、トライアルで入れておりまして、こちらの5社がマーケットメーカーになっております。で、1枚めくっていただきますと、この昨年11月から3月19日までの取引ですけれども、トレーディングボリュームとしては20万トン、1日平均1963トンということで、取引量と絶対量としては非常に小さい取引になってございます。で、特徴としましては、J クレジットの方法論によって値段の差があるということでございまして、再生可能エネルギーの由来の電力をセーブした、というクレジットにつきましては、値段が3000円ぐらいで、取引としては、トータルで14万トン弱ということで、一番多くなっております。で、次に、省エネルギー、エナジーセービングと呼ばれるもので、これはLED のランプを導入する、あるいは、高効率のボイラーを導入するといった形で、のプロジェクトでございまして、こちらは再生可能エネルギーの電力がRE100 や CDP でのスコープ2のオフセットに使えるということと比較しまして、省エネルギーの方はオフセットの できる範囲が狭いということを反映しまして、値段が1660円で、取引高も半分ぐらいになっているということでございます。私の方からの市場のご説明以上でございます。
Thank you so much, Matsuo-san, for providing us an overview of the domestic process that Japan has been doing in terms of the carbon trading market. It seems like we have a lot of insights already at hand, and we are now transitioning into a very important part of our webinar, which allows us to have a more flowy and fluid style for a panel discussion. And with this, I would like to call on and leave the ensuing discussion in the capable hands of our moderator, Professor De Los Reyes. Professor De Los Reyes, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Katrina. So for this panel discussion, what we really would like to do is to take the opportunity to know more about the current initiatives in the region and to also go a bit deeper on some of the points raised by our speakers in their presentation. We have, correct me if I'm wrong, Katrina, roughly 40 minutes for this session. And towards the end, our speakers will be addressing questions also from the audience. So please feel free to send in your questions through the comment box. So yeah, I'll start off with the first question. Perhaps I'll start with Mikkel. I'm wondering if you can share a bit more your experience in developing the exchange. You raised in your presentations the importance of trust. And I wonder if you can share a bit more about the difficulties you encountered in the early development of the carbon market related to this. And especially in the context of the region, there's still very little awareness about the role that carbon markets can play, and also perhaps not a stretch also to say that there's little confidence still in how carbon markets might be significant players or a significant tool at reducing carbon emissions.
Yeah, I'm very pleased to do that. Thank you for asking a very good question. Maybe before I share some of my views, I think the whole question we got to ask ourselves is, are carbon credit markets going to commoditize like we've seen so many other commodities market, or will they become fragmented because the differences between the different types of carbon credits are too different to really put under one basket? And I believe that the jury is still out on that. And our platform has set up for both those who are early in their journey and therefore needs a lot of hand-holding, and those who want to just trade carbon credit as a commodity or in a standardized contract. But I want to share with you 4 learnings that we've had in this period here. First of all, the buyer in Asia that is coming to market right now, willing to transact, are needing a lot of help. That's why we built our whole trust promise around it. They don't know what quality looks like, and although global rules are coming out right now, what they realize is it's not just about the methodology, it's about the project itself. So we spend a lot of time trying to help them actually understand the project, curate them, make sure that we do our own quality assessment. That has become key. The second thing they worry about is what claims can they make? Which compliance scheme are they under? What can they say? What can they not say? And this is a market that is very nascent, so they need this guidance. On the other hand, what we learned, and is equally important, is that there is very little price transparency and very little price discovery. And we see that because a lot of the market still is off-screen. Some estimates is 60 to 80%, and we know that there's a lot of spreads. The latest study suggests an average 16% or 15.5. So what we try to do is be very transparent about our prices, but we also try to run a number of auctions so that you actually get some discovery into the price of what the right price should be. And as I said, the prices today vary vastly between $2 and $800 plus. But the last thing we also have learned is important, and this is why I started my presentation the way it did, is we do need liquidity. And although I'm sure all of us on the panel here, AZEC, TSE, and ourselves are very proud of what we built, the reality is that volumes are not where we need them to be. if we need a truly strong voluntary carbon market to exist. So we need to collaborate, we need to connect. What we're trying to do in the absence of that is to create liquidity through some of our standardized contracts. So at least we get on-screen pricing sessions where people can actually observe the prices that come up and they make their own decision based on that. So I'll just finish with that.
Thank you very much, Mikkel. Next, I'd like to pose my question perhaps to Edwin. Just picking up on some points you raised in your presentation, you mentioned towards the end something about phasing out coal power plants, capping emissions. Of course, the Indonesian government has a number of ongoing initiatives. And I wonder, how do you see the carbon market complementing or supplementing some of those initiatives?
Yeah, right. Okay, thank you for the question. So, well, first thing first, Indonesia will have a new set of government coming in this year. We will have a new president, and we will have to wait. We have a new set of ministry. So again, the direction of the policy of Indonesia so far has been to reach this net zero target. And so far, Ministry of Environment has shown that they have a strict policy to pursue this target. I mean, Ministry of Environment is not focusing on so much on the business side of or monetary side of the carbon trading, but how the carbon trading can help Indonesia achieve our NDCs. And I think it's one of the point that I want to put forward, because then every action from the Ministry of Environment is to ensure the high integrity of the carbon credit. So I think that's the first one. And the second one is about, yeah, for sure, Indonesia has a lot of coal power plant. And I think we already tried to phase down some of them. But again, I think we need support in this part, of course, because all this investment already pour in to the coal power plant, in which they supposedly have this 20, 30 years of operational years ahead. Now they cut short. So I think it's when we try to get this, foreign investment in which they will acknowledge the effort of Indonesia of phasing down the coal power plant. And on the other hand, we will also try to develop our forestry side through the REDD plus, and also through this result-based payment other than carbon market, because this mechanism already appreciated by some countries, and I think hundreds of millions of dollars already coming in, and we hope it can kickstart this project furthermore. So I think that's the short answer of that question.
Thank you very much, Edwin. This is really insightful. My next question is for Dr. Zulfikar. You mentioned some of the potential for, say, cross-border. Well, we're a bit far from it still, but at least there are there's some potential for the region to move towards this. But I wonder, how do you foresee, the fact that the different economies in ASEAN are really at different stages of development. They have their very different markets. And do you see convergence, for example, in the carbon emissions or climate ambitions, even to begin with, among ASEAN countries? How do you think can we sort of leverage this to enable the development of carbon markets, and then plus resolve the fundamental differences that we see now and are really quite apparent across these different countries?
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, ASEAN member states are varied in terms of economy, and also with that, their sets of capacity and also regulatory frameworks For example, we just discussed like Indonesia and Singapore are probably like the forefronts in terms of carbon pricing and also carbon trading. But countries such as Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar doesn't even mention carbon pricing as an option in their climate policy. So I think the our various level of development that we really need to take into account. So I think addressing this, we really need to have some sort of like compartments of countries. So like assessing a group of countries with their specific needs and develop a, let's say like region specific capacity building programs, for example, like for for the CLM countries, for example, we are more on development of the carbon pricing policies themselves, while for countries such as Indonesia and Singapore on how to optimizing their current carbon trading system. And for other countries that are more ready, such as Malaysia and also Thailand and Vietnam and Philippines, on how they can kickstart their first carbon pricing or carbon trading mechanism. So there are different sets of capacity buildings and also support in terms of international cooperation required on this. Beyond the energy sector, there has not been specific discussions on regional carbon market, for example, but we also noted that there are something similar that we also see in the countries, which is the renewable energy certificate, which is different than carbon, but this is also something similar on which we put a certificate for each kilowatt hour of electricity generated from renewable energy. Several countries already have the trading system for this. And we actually start a new project, I think last year, that we call the RECAP, in which we try to see how we can implement the sub-regional trading for this RE certificate, focusing on the Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, so the peninsular side of the region. And I think such processes that we are currently doing on understanding the level of policy for each country, harmonizing these policies, looking at the implications, which can be like multi-sectorals. We need to talk with the trade, we need to talk with the foreign affairs and also related ministries on this. Can provide a lessons on how, like in the future, we can also develop similarly for regional carbon trading.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zulfikar. My next question is to Matsuo-san. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the challenges that you face setting up the exchange, and I don't know if I can tack on a quick question, but I am happy to go back to this question later on if the translators need a bit more time with it. In his presentation, he showed that he pointed out that the transactions are still relatively small, and of course not surprising given that it's really very new. But he also showed that there are quite big players that are part of the scheme, and I wonder, these players are of course some of the largest in Japan. There are also some of the more carbon intensive. There are players with a sizable carbon footprint. So I'm wondering how active do you foresee these players, the Sogoshosha, in these exchanges?
私どもの今後の市場、現在の市場あるいは今後の市場で中心的なプレイヤーとなる方ということであれば、今回マーケットメーカーで、なっていただいた、5社マーケットメーカーになっていただいたんですけれども、そこは住友商事、丸紅、三井物産という商社さんが3社になっていただいています。また、証券会社として大和証券が1社と、大きい銀行、メガバンクとしてみずほ銀行になっていただいています。で、現状、海外のボランタリークレジットを含めて、 ある程度ビジネスとして、カーボンクレジットに取り組んでおられるっていうのは、やはり総合商社さんが中心なんだろうなというふうには思っています。特にそのエネルギーの取引との関連で、エネルギーの取引のビジネス、あるいは、取引先との、いろいろなトータルなコンサルティングサービスも含めて商社さんが、やはり日本の、これまでのカーボンクレジット市場の中心なんだろうなと思っております。で、ただ、GX リーグの導入に伴って、金融機関も、今後将来的にカーボンクレジット市場を発展するということを見越して、証券会社さんや銀行さんも入ってきているということがございますので、今、マーケットメーカーになっていただいている業種の方が、中心になるんではないかというふうに予想しています。お答えになっていますでしょうか。
Yes, thank you very much, Matsuo-san. So going back to Mikkel, I wonder if you could share a little bit more about how the carbon tax legislation in Singapore influenced the carbon trading market.
Sure. It's been very important for two reasons. First of all, clearly it's given companies who are subject to the tax here in Singapore a clear reason for buying carbon credits. If there is an arbitrage between paying the tax or a cheaper carbon credit that meets the criteria, you immediately have a demand for those types of credits. Secondly, by the Singapore government putting its hat in the ring and talk about what they believe is credible carbon credits or credits of high quality, we now have a semi-formal or more formal way of establishing what quality look like is the eye of a regulator and a government. And that matters a lot in terms of bringing some of the trust into the system. So what we expect to happen is other countries will adopt the same blueprint. It will help climate change because it's cross-border. But I also think what we'll start to see is some of the criteria that they put in place for quality may be copied from other countries as well.
Thank you very much, Mikkel.
Could I maybe add just one more comment that we talk about transition credit and coal-fired power plant decommissioning before. This is something that we also find to be incredibly important. We've been part of the working group set up to deliver that. And we do believe that this is one of the things that we must get right here in ASEAN. So we've been one of the leading people in developing some of this, including some thought leadership papers. I say this only because I think most people on this call may be new to these types of credits, but I think it's critically important if we are to decarbonize the economies out here.
Thank you very much, Mikkel. On that note, I think I'll pick up on two questions from the audience, actually, because in fact, there's one asking, can small players such as farmers and small loggers participate in the carbon market? How? And please explain in layman's term. A second question, quite related, is what are the constraints for other countries in ASEAN for fully participating in the carbon trading? Is it institutional? Is it lack of information? So I think this is also reflective of the interest of our audience, like how exactly do these things work? Do these markets work? Who gets to participate and who doesn't? Yes, Mikkel, please go ahead.
We helped a number of smaller players trying to get into the market. And obviously, it's an arduous process. Before you start this process, to you actually get your first credit, it could be 2 years. Nevertheless, the methodologies that exist today have specifically been designed to help some of them. The challenges are that it requires a little bit of expertise in terms of developing the right plans, but also to get the right finance in the early days of this. What you need to do is you need to write certain documents. One of them is called a project development plan that you need to submit to a certain registry to get these things approved. And only once that is approved and you've actually started to implement some of the initiative, for example, if it's a farmer, alternative use of soil, alternative tilling or watering or rotational grazing, where the credit starts to arise. But if there are specific people on this call who has an interest in trying to dip their toes into this, they're welcome to contact me afterwards. It can be done. But one needs to think carefully about what it is one has before you jump straight into it. Is it a viable project? But many of them can be, especially here in Asia.
Thank you, Mikhail. I wonder if others would also like to answer the questions rather. Specifically in the second question, for example, it was raised like, what do you think inhibits other players or other ASEAN countries from developing their respective carbon markets? Whether it's lack of
maybe I can-
information, if it's institutional.
Yeah.
There's
So, yeah, thank you. So I think both are there. As we discussed before, I think for some countries, they don't even have a policy related with carbon pricings or not even mentioned in their climate policies. So they really need to start with that to understand that this is one of the options they can put in place to address their climate targets. But this is again specific for carbon pricing. But I think many countries already have the carbon credits mechanism before. At the same time, there is also, I think, as I mentioned, we conducted this high-level dialogue on carbon pricing before, and among the challenges mentioned, informations and the lack of understanding of the carbon trading mechanism itself are one of the challenges mentioned. And this includes, like, for example, I mean, like the first questions addressed before, like what would be the process to do that? What will be the MRV processes and mechanisms required for them to be able to actually conduct this carbon trading? The complexity, especially when it involves trading internationally, also add another layer of complexity to the discussions. And at the same time, they also noted that there is a potential impacts in terms of increasing price. So they really want to know how it can be addressed properly. So discussion such as in revenue recycling of the revenue coming from the carbon trading is something that the member states want to hear. But it's not only like challenges. Of course, there are opportunities that we see that countries start to realize that carbon pricing is one of the options that they need to entertain. And I think looking at the cases in Indonesia and Singapore, and also some others that are currently developing it, hopefully at the very least in national level, we can see several new carbon pricing policies. And maybe in the future, we can also connect them through a more connected regional carbon market system.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zulfikar. My next question is on, well, it's not without controversy, the idea of like how do we make sure that carbon markets actually work? And one of the big issues, of course, is the integrity and transparency of these transactions. So I'm wondering what kind of measures are being implemented to sort of address this concern, because even in more established markets like the EU, this has been, you know, a big issue. So learning from that sort of experience, how do we then sort of think or also anticipate that there might be these kinds of irregularities cropping up as we try to establish a credible carbon market in the ASEAN and Japan? Any of the speakers can answer. Yes, Mikhail.
Well, I don't want to be doing all the speaking here, but I think we addressed it already in some of my 4 areas of trust. But if I try to lift it up a bit here, if we're looking at the voluntary carbon market, we need to operate at 3 levels. We need to operate at the government level, and other peoples on the panel have talked about what we need there. When we talk about the quasi-regulation, we do see that the registries have stepped up and create new methodologies. We know that international organizations like what's called the ICVCM, it's a long acronym, and the VCMI had set a bar fairly high on what quality looks like. That then allowed the 3rd layer, people like me, to leverage on that and to determine within those methodologies, which are now a lot more robust, which one of the projects that are developed under them are really of good quality, and are they priced correctly? So I think on the second layer, we have a lot of it in place. By June, July this year, the first criteria is starting to come out. The first approved credits are starting to come out. And that will fundamentally change some of this. And at the same time, as you see, we have a flourish of rating agencies, price mechanisms that we're starting to see. So I think we're starting to get the package together. What we really need now is to try and scale some of this.
Thank you, Mikhail. I wonder if others also would like to answer.
Yeah, I guess I would like to add. Well, I think I want to add more alphabet soup from what Mikhail already mentioned. That first one is about the MRV, or the monitoring, reporting, and verification, in which it's a process to ensure that the green project is really there and really has impact on the climate and also for the environment. So I think we've heard of, we've read that last year or 2 years ago, carbon credits been scrutinized a lot because of critics or findings that found that the green project is actually not as high or as good as they claim to be. So that's why the MRV, the transparency of the project, is need to be put out there, out front. So for example, I think nowadays a lot of startup or technological company already provide us with, let's say, the satellite technology in which they can really doing MRV with lower cost, but also with higher precision. So I think that's something that we also need, because at the end of the day, we need the help from the VVB, the validation and verification body. And we need the VVB to be capable and also affordable, because if they're capable but we cannot afford it, then what's the point of doing this carbon project? So I think that's what I can add from what Mikhail already says.
Thank you very much, Edwin. Mikhail mentioned briefly the price mechanism, and I'm wondering if what are the considerations that you think we should make in terms of like putting in place an effective price system that would incentivize participation while also ensuring that this leads to meaningful emissions reductions. I understand it's a difficult balancing act sometimes, and as earlier pointed out, also the demand is not where it is. And I wonder now in this context, if I can also ask this to Edwin, especially in incipient markets, when you're getting started, there were reports late last year that, the transactions in the exchange were not as high as initially anticipated. So I'm wondering what kind of measures or incentives are being put in place to sort of stoke up that demand.
Yeah. Okay. So the first question about the pricing itself. So I think from the studies, we know that the carbon price cannot be too high and cannot be too low. I mean, if it's too high, then we will have maybe inflation streaming from this high carbon price. And if it's too low, then it's not going to worth anything. So I think the market mechanism, and I think market mechanism is, as long as the demand and supply side already mature, I think we can see the objective price of the carbon. So I think the regulation, the policy needs to boost or improve how we can improve or increase the demand side and supply side of it. So in Indonesia case, the IDS carbon launch, instead of all the regulation already completed, we launch first and then we have to wait for several regulations. For example, Indonesia right now, the government right now is still in discussion with how we can produce or issue the regulation of international trading. So we would like to export, of course, the carbon unit, but it needs to be under the condition that it will not violate the target of Ministry of Environment to achieve the NDC. So there's one of the example in which we need the regulations to catch up with this market. Otherwise, we still have to wait for the demand and supply to be getting up on their own. So, but I don't think without government intervention or policy, right policy, the correct policy, I think we have a steep road ahead.
Thank you very much, Edwin. You mentioned government regulation, so I wonder if I could now turn to Matsuo-san. He spoke about some of the key players that are, of course, involved, like the market players and the market makers in the exchange. And I wonder what kind of role do you foresee for the government, for the Japanese government in the coming years, because this is really just one of many initiatives to facilitate the growth and development of the carbon markets and to stabilize the market, essentially, especially since this is really just getting started and we're still several phases away from the target.
ありがとうございます。で、先ほど私の方から、日本の排出量取引が GX リーグという、自主的な案に参加して自主的に目標を設定するという形でスタートしているというふうに申し上げました。で、これは産業界にとっては非常に受け入れやすいんですけれども、実際にカーボンプライシング、あるいは、カーボンクレジットがトレーディングされるという点からは、やはり、供給量、あるいは流通量が少ないのかなと思っております。で、この点で、日本政府は、2023年から始まった GX リーグにつきまして、2026年以降に、本格化するというふうに言ってます。で、実は本格化の中身がまだ決まっていなくて、これから考えるということですけれども、市場の規律強化とか罰則の強化ということが候補に上がっています。で、注目すべき点は、2033年に、大きい発電事業者を対象に、排出枠の部分的な優勝オークションが始まるということになっておりまして、少なくとも2033年以降は、エクセスリダクションの形から、ヨーロッパ型のアローワンスに、排出量取引の取引対象は変わるんではないかと想定されておりますので、取引の活性化という観点からは、なるべく EU のような、全業種にわたって、法的な義務、罰則が伴った形で、コンプライアンス市場が発展していくということが、やはり、肝なのかなと思います。で、もう一つはその価格につきまして、先ほど、コメントがありましたけれども、で、もう一つ、価格なんですけども、基本的には排出、カーボンクレジットの値段が右肩上がりに上がっていくというのが、おそらくエネルギー転換、ビジネス転換として望ましいと。ただ、あまりにもボラティティが高いと問題ですので、この点につきまして、日本国政府は、プライスコリドーという形で右肩上がりに上がっていくんだけれども、一定の価格の上限、価格の下限を設けるという制度設計の基本的な構想を示しております。ただ、値段の上限と下限をどう設定するのかっていうのは非常に難しいと思いますけれども、値段が、どんどん右肩上がりに上がりつつ、ある程度のレンジバンドで収まるようにするというのが一つ解決策なのかなとは思っております。以上です。
Thank you very much, Matsuo-san. I wonder if I could pivot back to Edwin and the question of government's role. And I understand that, of course, you have a new government in place and it's still in a wait and see situation. But I wonder what, in your view, are the kind of policies that you would like implemented by the current government?
Okay, right. Okay. I think the first one, of course, the implementation of the carbon tax. Right. So Indonesia already have this regulation for carbon taxes supposedly imposed in 2022. But then the government decided to postpone it. And I think we have to wait for the new government, the new administration to address this carbon tax, because carbon tax is something that can be a stick to the business player. And the second one is how the government then can open the market to the international market, as well as maintaining our goal to achieve the NDC. So I think international market is important because Indonesia has large and huge potential of carbon credit, right from our rainforest and to the mangrove forest and then to the carbon capture and storage. So it's important that we can allow the project owner or project developer to then push the market internationally, by then we will have more demand of it, and then we will have a better price. And I think it's if I can to push it more, I think it's important for ASEAN and Japan in this time, like Indonesia, Singapore, Japan, Malaysia, to cooperate on this space, because what we know, like Dr. Zulfikar already mentioned about the CBAM, this is something that ASEAN will have to face together. And I think this is something that we can start to discuss and cooperate to ensure that no one really try to moving the goalposts just according to their necessity. So yeah, I think that's my answer.
Thank you very much, Edwin. So you mentioned internationalization of markets and, making sure that they are aligned with NDCs. And in the earlier presentation of Mikel, I noticed that he mentioned the fact that J credits, which are locally sourced, might not be enough to meet Japan's NDC. So I wonder if I could invite Masuo-san to give a comment on that also, just how important is internationalization and having access to international markets as a strategy is at ensuring that Japan meets its NDCs.
Uh, 私の方で。
Yes, I'm wondering if I
あ、
could.
すいません。はい、ありがとうございます。で、まず、排出量取引について、制度的には、キャップ&トレードを共有化するっていうのが一義的にはあるんですけど、これはなかなか現実的には難しいと。で、実際に考えられるのは、そのベースライン&クレジットについて、例えばその日本が、その ASEAN の国で、ベースライン&クレジットのプロジェクトを実施するという形で、クレジットを生み出すという方法があると思いますけれども、CIX の方もご紹介いただいてた JCM という制度が、ジョイントクレジッティングメカニズムというのがございまして、これを、使って、日本のその資金あるいはノウハウなどをプロジェクトに活かすという形で、日本のNDC の削減の貢献と、途上国におけるそのプロジェクトの実施という形でウィンウィンの関係に立つということができるのではないかと思っています。で、ただその際には JCM がの実施の前提としまして、パリ協定の6条2項の市場メカニズムに適合するということになりますので、2国間で MOU を結ぶということと、あと相当調整を実施するという必要がありますので、その点は政府の外交の交渉ということになってくるとは思います。で、あと農業分野ということに関しますと、日本の今、J クレジットの中で非常にホットな話題としては、水田の水を抜く期間を長くするとメタンの発生が減るという形でのクレジットの創出というのが、今ホットな話題になっておりまして、水田農業、東南アジアとかでも、同じような形で、同じ方法論を適用するという形で、小さい農業の方とかもクレジットに参加するというのもあるのかなと思いました。以上でございます。
Thank you very much, Matsuo-san. We have one question from the audience that we have not yet answered. The question is it possible to have a truly regulated, accurately valued, and proven market of reasonable value? Why not simply put a carbon tax on it? I think a tax would create more incentive to decarbonize in order to escape, I guess, in order to reduce emissions. That's what he meant. Yeah. Yes, Mikel.
I'd like to come back to my opening statement where I contested the point that it's an either or. I think we need both. Why am I so passionate about that? What a carbon tax does primarily, it forces companies to reduce their emissions. But we know that there are 8 to 10 very hard to abate sectors that will not get to net zero anytime soon. It is not economically feasible. It is not technically feasible. And for them, we need another solution. And that's what the voluntary carbon market does, because it incentivizes solutions that either keep carbon sequestered or that develops new technologies that are not financially viable by incentivizing them, giving them money to develop technologies that absorb the carbon that we have in the air. So these two mechanisms actually go hand in hand, and they're not opposite. So I do believe that if we choose just one of them, we will not have the full solution set ahead of us.
Thank you, Mikkel. Are there any others who would like to answer this question? No? Okay. So I guess, well, we're nearly, I think we're near the end of the session. So I guess just a very quick last question, and just to give an opportunity to anyone else who might want to answer. So given all of these challenges that you mentioned, such as regulatory hurdles, market differences across ASEAN countries, difficulties at harmonizing different trading systems eventually, and I guess I'm wondering, how do you foresee carbon trading as having the potential to really make a significant contribution, say in the near or medium term, especially in light of the fact that there are climate targets that we have to meet in the medium term, in 2030, 2050 timelines? Anyone can answer.
すいません。それでは私の方から。完全な、炭素の規制っていうものはおそらく難しいんじゃないかなとは思います。で、排出量取引についても理想的にはその京都議定書、京都メカニズムっていうものがあるんですけど、やはり政治的には現実的には立ち行かなかったというのはあります。あと、排出量取引であっても、やはり大規模排出施設に対象が限定されるということで、これは炭素税、排出量取引、あるいは排出量取引でも、その家計とか運輸部門とか、その対象の形に変えて複合的な制度を複数入れていくっていう必要があると思います。で、あと、排出量取引でも、2050年になると結局、理想的には排出量がどんどん減っていって、おそらくアローワンスの量も減っていくと。で、最終的には吸収、除去のクレジットだけは取引だけるっていう世界になっていくと、理想的には値段がどんどん上がっていくんですけど、でも排出のアローワンスの量はどんどん減っていくということなので、その排出量取引も、いつまでも、例えば、たとえ EU ETS で今のような形で存続していかなくて、どこかではおそらく消えてなくなるものじゃないかと思いますので、そういう意味ですいません、お答えにはなってないんですけど、複数の完全なものはなくて、どんどん変化させていくものを並行して、かつどんどん変化させながらやっていくというしかないのかなと、気候変動対策はもうそういうふうに諦めるしかないのかなと思っています。以上です。
Thank you very much, Matsuo-san. So at this point, if there are no other last comments from our speakers, I would like to thank everyone for such thoughtful answers. I think it has been a really enlightening session. At this stage, I'd like to pass on the mic back to Katrina.
Right. Thank you so much, Julie, and the rest of our panel members. It has definitely been a very interesting and fruitful discussion to know where the ASEAN member states are, what is the current level of accomplishment and initiative that has been going on in terms of carbon trading in our two regions. And at the same time, they've highlighted the remaining challenges and gaps that governments would need to hurdle on in order to successfully bridge, and even possibly in the near future to establish and foresee a cross-border carbon trading market mechanism between Japan and ASEAN. We would like to note that the presentations of our speakers will be available in our website within this week. We will be informing our attendees regarding that, and we will also be providing a summary of our webinar discussion to highlight the significant insights that have been brought up, especially in our panel session. And with that, I think this brings us to a close. We are happy that the ASEAN-Japan Center webinar has become a platform for this kind of dialogue. And we are happy to share that our center will be looking more towards implementing programs relating to this and relating to and supporting the ASEAN Zero Emissions Community and the ASEAN Strategy for Carbon Neutrality. So we hope that you would keep in touch and that you would watch out for our succeeding programs after this webinar. Thank you so much, and we wish you a good afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Seems like so.